Hello and welcome to another video by ES Repair. Next step we're going to do is install the power supply. Now the power supply, which came with this bare bones kit, is a 650 watt power supply. This is usually about average. They do go up to 1200 watts for a lot of the high performance or gaming PCs, but this one here is just 650, which is plenty for what this computer is going to be needed for. Now if you look on the back, you'll notice that there's two switches. This one here, which is the manual on-off switch, and this is a voltage selector switch. Some some power supplies have them, some do not. It just depends on the manufacturer. If it does have a voltage selector on it, make sure it is set for the proper voltage that is in your house. If it's 120, you select it for the 115 or 120. If it's 240, you flip the switch to where it says 240. Not all power supplies will have the power switch, but some of them will have the voltage selector. Now this one here is properly set for 115. And of course you have the plug for the power cord. Now if you look, you'll also see the screw holes. The screw holes are in different locations, and this allows you to insert the power supply in one direction only. This is known as a ATX power supply. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert the power supply. Now you'll see down here at the bottom, you'll see that little rack there, or that slit, and that is where the power supply will rest. Depending on the size of the power supply, some are bigger, some are smaller, but that's where they'll rest. Now as you can see, when you sit it in there, there's not going to be a whole lot of room. You've probably been asking, how come I'm waiting till the last thing to do with the power supply, and this is why. Because there's a certain order in some of these computers that you have to install hardware, otherwise you're going to interfere with another component. Like I've shown earlier when I installed the hard drive and the memory. Now, let me go ahead and take it back out, and I'm going to show you the back of the computer. When you look in the back, you'll notice that I've got my face plate with all my components identified. Back here is where the power supply is going to be installed. Take note where the screw holes are at. This is the alignment that the power supply has to be in. As you can see here, you'll see that the screw hole here matches here, and so on. You want to make sure that when you insert the power supply, the holes do match up. Otherwise, you won't be able to screw it in. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, one good way to remember is that the fan always goes on below. It always faces on the bottom, because it draws air out of the case and expels it to the outside. Once you have it in place and the holes lined up, now you can put the screws in. Now once you have the screws into the case and you have your power supply screwed in, you'll see it like this. You got the screws on each end. You got the power switch off. You always want to leave it in the off position. And you double check, make sure your voltage selector is set for the appropriate voltage. Now as you can see here, everything in the power supply is connected and screwed in. Now we can go ahead and begin connecting the cables. Now what we'll do here is move these out of the way. As you can see, I've got these cables wrapped up because I don't need them. What I need is the motherboard connector, which is this one here. I need the solid state drive connector, which is this one here. That's going to go to the bottom down here. And I'm going to use this one here for the optical drive and the hard drive. So what I'm going to do here is move my cables out of the way. And you may need a flashlight to see. Like you see there, I've got it plugged in where it belongs in the back of the optical drive. Got that connector done. Now I can go down here and I want to run my cable for the solid state drive. I'm going to run the power cable Now you'll see what I'm referring to as to how much room that you actually have. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I need to make sure that I have enough airflow here to keep the memory and the CPU cool. I don't want to block any of the airflow. Now I'm going to go ahead and connect the P4. As you see here, the P4 goes over here where you've seen the 4-pin plug earlier in the videos. I got my cable and everything running to the front. Now I can go ahead and plug in the hard drive. And there's a hard drive connector. So I'll go ahead and plug it in. And there we go. Now I'm using the same pigtail off the optical drive to plug in the hard drive, and as you can see they fit just right. And I still don't have plenty of room for my air to flow. It's not touching anything, there's not too much tension on there. It's enough to where I can still continue to have airflow. Now all that's left is the motherboard and the solid state drive. The motherboard is this plug right here. Now what I'm going to do here, and I've already got everything wrapped up, I'm going to stuff it in this bay up here. Everything's nice, neatly wrapped up and tied. Now everything will be out of the way and I can go ahead and finish up. Now the cable is this one right here. You want to make sure that you use the correct orientation. And you'll see the nipple on this side. You want to make sure that the clamp is on the same side. Now you want to make sure that everything is snug and in place, everything's fully inserted. You'll check over here that the latch is fully engaged and that the thing is all the way down. Now you don't want to use too much pressure. You want to make sure that it is sitting where it's supposed to be and then push it down. It will automatically snap into place with the latch once it's in place. Now, as you can see now, everything's plugged in up here. I've got plenty of airflow. Now I can come down here and plug in the solid state drive. Just like that. Now, as you can see, everything's plugged in. All the power, the motherboard, solid state drive, the hard drive, the optical drive, motherboard, the P4, and everything's got power now. Now, let's go ahead and connect the data cables. Now the data cable is going to depend, they come in different sizes. You want to make sure that you're using the correct one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this one, which is the black one. It's a SATA cable. I'm going to connect it to the optical drive. What I can do is run the cable up underneath it. And then I can slide the power cable out of the way and install it. And there we go. Now you can see it's plugged in. Everything's firm. It's supposed to be plugged in completely. Now I can do the hard drive. Now let me go ahead and take this cable here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run it underneath the hard drive again. Because keep in mind, I'm trying to keep airflow here. Now the optical drive will depend on the motherboard. The optical drive, you'll need to plug it into one of the other SATA connectors. And I'm going to show you the importance as to why later on in upcoming videos when I go into BIOS and set it up. Because of the way the motherboard interacts with hard drives and optical drives are very different. So there is a certain configuration that you want to do the optical drive and hard drives. Now, according to this, they're labeled SATA 1 through SATA 6. Your motherboard may say SATA 0 as the first one. Now, whichever device or hard drive, whether it's a traditional or a solid state drive, if you have more than one hard drive in your computer, whichever drive is going to be the startup drive or your boot drive has to go to the first SATA connector, which is SATA 0 or SATA 1. Now, because my solid state drive is going to be the boot up drive, I'm going to connect it using SATA 0. And there we go. Now the SATA drive's connected, and of course you'll see some of these will have long cables. Especially if you're an ATX, that's good, but not necessary if you're using micro ATX. But this is what they had, so this is what I ordered. And then you match the lineups, the orientations. You'll see the little sliver on the right hand side. You want to make sure that you do give them the correct orientation as you see on the board. Now because this is going to be a boot up drive, this is going to be in SATA 0 or SATA 1. As you see there. Now, you'll notice that I have it in the very first SATA plug. This is always the boot SATA port. So whatever the boot device you're using, whether it's a solid state or a traditional hard drive, always plug that boot drive into the very first SATA slot port. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and connect my hard drive, the traditional one. Now I'm going to use a special adapter because this one here has a right angle, as you see here. I'm going to use this to help keep the airflow in place. I don't want it rubbing the fan. As you see there, that's what I do it for, is because I can have plenty of airflow here and nothing is rubbing the fan, because you don't want anything rubbing that fan to stop it or make any noise. You want the airflow to be continuous. Now once it's plugged in, now I can plug it in to the motherboard. And there you go. As you can see there now, I've got the motherboard connected. I've got my boot drive in the first SATA plug, this traditional hard drive in the next plug over, and I put my optical drive in SATA number 5. Now I will show you in details as to why I'm doing that in the upcoming videos when I show you going into BIOS to configure BIOS. Now as you can see, everything is now connected. You want to make sure that your excess cables is bundled up and tied to make sure it stays out of the way. You don't want it dangling all in the computer. If you have excess cables, you can tie them up, make them out of the way. You want to make sure that there's no blockage of airflow whatsoever. And what I'm going to do now is put the case fan back in. Now, as you can see now, I've got the case fan back into the frame. Now I want to connect it to its own connector. Now the connector is usually somewhere around here below the power regulators, and what you'll do, these are normally 3-prong. Some fan cases plug into the Molex 4-pin. It just depends on what kind of case fan that you're putting in. This one here is the case fan, which has a technometer on it that tells the motherboard how fast the fan is rotating. The CPU one has one as well. Now what you'll do is go ahead and take it, line it up with the backside clip that you see on the back of these plugs. You line them up and then plug it in, just like you see there. That's all you have to do. You want to make sure you get the orientation right. If you don't, you're going to damage something. Any excess cord, cable, wire that you have, just go ahead and tie it up out of the way. And there you go. Now everything here is ready to go. I've got all my data connectors, the power supply is connected, power supply is installed, data connectors are installed, everything is ready to go, and now it's ready to put back together. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and start putting this back together. Now you may see this cable here. This is a USB 3.0 header for the motherboard. Now since my computer here isn't going to use it, I'm not going to worry about it, and a lot of times I'll just tuck it in. Now that everything is installed and ready to go, as you can see, I went ahead and put my back plating on. I'm done with it. Now all we got to do now is put the computer back together. But the first thing we want to do first, before we do, is remember the battery that I removed. This battery right here, that ran to your BIOS and CMOS, your real-time clock. What we're going to do is put the battery back in. Now what you'll do is you just take the battery, gently slide it into one side, and then push down, and there you go. Now the motherboard has a little power to the real-time clock, and everything is set to go. Because you always want to remember, anytime you're working on the motherboard or anything inside the computer, you want to make sure all the power is removed from the motherboard. And that includes the power supply and, if necessary, the battery. Now let's go ahead and put the rest of the computer back together. Put my thumb screws back in. And there you go. Now the computer is ready to be set up. Well, I'm your host, Mr. Fix-It. Stay tuned for additional videos. The next video we're going to be working with is setting up your computer for the very first time. Well, thank you for watching this video.